Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic Podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference.
Hey everybody, it's Big Mike, your home for progressive news issues and candidates here in Colorado. Today I'm speaking with former Senate candidate Karen Breslin. She is a lawyer, a former reporter, and currently a professor of political science at CU Denver. And and she joins us this morning to discuss her run and everything going on in the world today. So let's throw it over to Karen. Tell us why you got in the race and how you think things went.
Well, I got in the race because it was pretty obvious to me that John Hickenlooper was uh, trying to be nice about this, uh, an ineffective and weak um, advocate for working people,
Yeah.
and seemingly incapable of taking on Donald Trump and all the hell that has been brought down around us over the last year and however many months. And it was obvious to me early on that that's who John Hickenlooper would be. He's always been a centrist. If this were the 1980s, he would be a solid, Republican
Yeah.
of the old school economic conservative type. He is not, as far as I can tell, really much of a Democrat and never has been. And politicians like Hickenlooper, and I would put Michael Bennet in this category too, they are, coming into the Democratic Party under the same sort of tradition as Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. The Democratic Party really lurched to the right in the 1990s, maybe a little bit before that, and it stayed there, and it has stayed there. And so being alarmed at the things that Donald Trump was doing as a political science professor, as a human being, as a lawyer, I felt like, someone had to speak out about it. And one of the things that I did consistently was talk about the white supremacy in Donald Trump's policies, the Christian nationalism associated with those policies, and his absolute disregard for the US Constitution and the restraints on presidential power. So that propelled me into the race. I expected, and I was right all the way up until December, that other Democrats who had a career stake in the political process, in other words, they were gaming out where they were going to go with their careers over the next however many decades, that they would be unwilling and reluctant to oppose an incumbent. And that proved to be true. And Julie Gonzalez waited all the way till December to jump in the race. How much stronger of a candidate would she be in this moment had she started a lot sooner? And I don't mean that as a criticism of her, just an observation, because it's a hard decision to make, and it's one that took me a long time to make as well. I'm just saying that, it's career politicians have a lot of things to think about in terms of undertaking a challenge to an incumbent. I didn't have to think about any of that because I'm not a career politician.
Gotcha. And I believe you were knocked out at Assembly, just barely missing that mark.
Well, that's a generous way of framing it. I got 24.4% of the vote and I needed 30 to get on the ballot.
Okay.
So it wasn't that close, but it was, for someone who didn't have the support of the progressive establishment or the, just establishment Dems, I am pretty proud of that showing. Absolutely, I am.
No, and that's quite a feat considering, again, you're not an established politician. You don't necessarily have the name recognition. So what are some things you think your campaign did right to get you even to that, a quarter of the voting uh, population in that assembly?
Well, I did start early and I got to as many places in the state as I could. I think I ended up at, more than 30 counties, 31, 32, 33, 34, somewhere in that vicinity. That was a lot of events to attend, a lot of, picnics and parades and central committee, or what do they call them? They have various names for the county meetings. Central committees, executive committee, they have various names for them. I attended a bunch of those, as many as I could get to. I was in front of a number of indivisible chapters. Any pro-democracy group that, I knew of, I reached out or they reached out to me. And so being on the ground and listening to people all over the state, I think was important to the success that I had. And then I think that I was wise to be blunt about the situation that we're in. And as far as I can tell, very few establishment politicians are willing to say, if any, like I'm not even sure anybody pops into my mind, that, it's one thing to talk about Donald Trump's betrayal of working people. I mean, that's obvious. In some respects, the Democrats share that problem, but to ignore the Christian nationalism, to ignore the assault on women's rights, to ignore the white supremacy, to ignore the relationship between white supremacy and the attack on the immigrant communities, I think that's far less defensible. And I talked a lot about Gaza and human rights and international law, and those are norms that need to be upheld. And one of the things that I think I did right, or at least something that I'm appreciative of myself for doing, is saying those things that no one else was really willing to say, calling out Pete Hegseth and his alignment with these Christian nationalist, complete lunatic, fringe movements in the Christian nationalist world, and talking about the way that Trump has been trying to whitewash American history and essentially rewrite it into white people are oppressed and, America's a great country and nothing bad ever happened to people of color and Native people, and slavery really wasn't a thing. And, just trying to rewrite American history. And that's appalling. It's just absolutely shocking. And make no mistake, I mean, that's an assault on all of our rights. When they get the ability to rewrite history, when they get the ability to rewrite narratives in a political frame that benefits a small group of people, and they sell, the white majority on that, that is terrifying for all of us. There should be. And so I didn't stay silent about any of that. And I feel good that I did that. I wish I had been more effective and gotten to more people and been able to get on the ballot with those messages. But they need to be said, because that's really the threat of Donald Trump. He's not just another bad Republican. He's not even just another bad Republican who pushes the boundaries of presidential power. He's a bad Republican who's also a white supremacist and a misogynist and wants to roll back American history and deprive people of their civil rights. And that needs to be said, and it needs to be said often and loud.
And frankly, and I'm a progressive, a leftist. He's a fascist.
Yes, and I use the F word pretty much every time I talk to him. Let's not call it authoritarianism. Let's call it what it is. And, because some of those words just sort of smooth it over. Well, authoritarian, I mean, so authority's not bad, is it? But most people get that fascism is bad. And as a political science, person with political science training, I didn't use that word lightly. I really wanted to understand the historical context of that word, what it would mean in this time frame, and whether I could check the boxes for him. And boy, can you check the boxes for him. And so, to pretend that he's not what he is, I think, part of how we've ended up where we are. And it was pretty predictable that, something like a year ago, that the Democrats would just wait it out, just wait until the midterms. And, from where I stand, if Donald Trump hadn't engaged in the Iran war, there's every likelihood that he would continue on without much resistance. If gas prices weren't through the roof and inflation through the roof, would the American people even know that, that he is the absolute disaster that he is? And in some ways they would, right? But in the ways that matter, in the ways that make people sit up and take notice, you and I follow politics on a regular basis. It's our thing. But, most Americans, especially if you're working two jobs and you're struggling to get by, and even if you're not struggling so much, but you're just busy in the way that this culture keeps us all busy and distracted, then are you really alert to all the ways that he is chipping away at our political system and attacking the rights of marginalized people, LGBTQ, immigrants, etc.? How can you be alert to all of those things? And, you probably feel as I do, even when you're trying to stay on top of it, it's like drinking from a fire hose most of the time. You can't track it all. Right. And so for our leaders to stay silent about it because, the midterms are coming and Trump's going to self-destruct and let's just wait that out. That is a weak and morally bankrupt strategy in dealing with this incredible threat. And, and here's the other thing. Okay, so they get power in November, fingers crossed, right? But, he breaks the law on a regular basis. The law is, a mere nuisance to him. And, so really that's going to change things. The Democrats are going to get in power. How's that going to work?
Yeah.
So unless there's enough uprising from the American people to say, look, you are a president, you are not a fascist ruler, a king, a dictator, whatever word you want to use. And, your name and your likeness and your image it should not be plastered all over Washington and all over American political culture as, some kind of a deity. Until there's some kind of real recognition on the part of the American people exactly why he is so dangerous. And until Democrats are really willing to lead that dialogue in a defensible way, then, I don't have any hope that even Democrats getting in power is going to make a huge difference. Sorry, I'm on a little bit of a rant this morning.
No, absolutely. And it's a perfect example. I'm sure as a political science professor, you're familiar with the ratchet effect.
The ratchet effect, maybe I'm not.
So that's where Republicans get in power, they move things to the right, and then Democrats get in power and they prevent things from going back to the left. So it's like a ratchet where it goes one way, but it doesn't come back the other way when the Democrats get in power.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And this ridiculous autopsy, I haven't read it. I only know that, oh, it was badly prepared and oh, they tried to not release it because it was poorly prepared. But you don't need to spend however many thousands of dollars they spent on it to know what the problem was. Gaza was an obvious problem. And if you dig down even deeper, the real problem with the Democratic Party, in my estimation, is a lack of core moral values that it consistently adheres to. And so when you elevate a Hillary Clinton to be your nominee after she comes off of taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from Goldman Sachs, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a definite problem. And when you abandon the roots of the Democratic Party, at least in the New Deal era on, which was really about working people and economic fairness and civil rights, when you abandon all of that and you make it, a corporate party, essentially, you don't give people any choice anymore. And that's really the legacy of Bill Clinton, in my estimation. I covered Washington right before Clinton was elected and, saw sort of the policy proposals and things that were kicking around. I saw the whole globalization debate play itself out, and it really wasn't much of a debate because there was a handful of Democrats saying, wait, what happens to workers here in the US when all the jobs are offshore? And, other Democrats like Clinton were like, oh no, this is all going to be good. It's great. Well, it's been
A
good in some
disaster.
ways, yes, but in other ways, it's been a disaster. Ecologically, it's a disaster. In terms of national security, arguably, it's a disaster. I mean, during COVID, we couldn't even get the materials we need because we had outsourced that production. And then you think about all of the devastated communities in the country. I was in Selma, Alabama, a few years ago, and and I was there for all the reasons that people go to Selma, Alabama to be in this momentous place where people died for their freedom. And the place is economically devastated, as is so much of the rural South. And does the Democratic Party have any plan for that? Do they care about these economic devastation zones all over the country, including right here in Colorado?
No.
And if I, as an active Democrat, can't point to anything, or really even anyone who's carrying these messages, how can how can unaffiliated voters understand? And then Joe Biden, I'm back to the autopsy thing again. I just saw Jill Biden on one of the Sunday shows, which is that a bigger way? Is there a bigger waste of time than Sunday morning talk shows? But I was here, I'm in a motel room, so I'm killing time. And she's like, oh, I was so shocked. I was so shocked at the way I thought he was having a stroke. Okay, Jill, how many clips were there of Biden before that being
Yes.
disoriented, not knowing where he was, somebody having to direct him? Are they really going to sell us that line of bullshit? And do they think we're that dumb to believe it?
Right. Those of us who are tuned in were not surprised.
No,
We were
like
begging Biden not to run.
Exactly, right? And so who are the who in fact who runs the Democratic, sorry, I really am wound up today and I didn't expect to be, but who are the people who actually run the damn Democratic Party? Because you mean to tell me that there weren't, okay, where were the other Democrats to run against him? See, that's the part that just puzzles the hell out of me. That's like that, that's what I was referring to relative to our unpopular incumbents in Colorado.
No.
Why won't you just stand up and do the right thing, even if you lose? And, there should have been no shortage of Democrats running against Joe Biden. And, and to the extent that the political process rejects that, shames it, mocks it even, that anytime you're squelching choice, anytime you're squelching opportunity for people to hear different voices, you're not doing the right thing. And that's just the truth of the matter. And, when I was the lone person running against Hickenlooper, there was a little comfort in that for me because I figured I could probably get on the ballot just being the only one running against him. And then I had a decent amount of enthusiasm and support in spite of no media coverage and so on. I raised about $166,000, which was hard fought. And I worked full time. And so, all the stuff that I had going against me, and I still did reasonably well. But when Senator Gonzalez got into the race, it became much more of a race for all of us. It shone a light on the fact that there was actually opposition to Hickenlooper in a way that I couldn't do by myself. Look at the AG race and the fact that there are 4 strong candidates for that job. Does anyone think that the voters would be better off if there was just one? I mean, and so this desire to kind of manipulate the process so that there aren't so many, the preferred candidate actually is the person that people get to pick from. We really, as progressive people, those of us who are doing what we can to transform the Democratic Party, we got to call that out. We got to put a stop to that kind of rigging of the game, so to speak. Yeah. Okay, I'll take a breath. Sorry.
So you mentioned the Democratic autopsy, Ken Martin's absolute failure on that. I wanted to ask you, have you had a chance to reflect and see where you and your campaign fell short, and do you have any advice for progressives running in the future?
Well, I'm a political outsider. I never held elective office. I have excellent credentials for the job. I have a law degree. I have a master's degree in political science. I did additional graduate coursework in international relations. I worked for 25 years for the National Park Service in various positions of management responsibility, including over issues like sustainability and climate change. I had my hands and pieces and parts of that for the Intermountain region. And, I know how the federal government functions. I have a deep knowledge of environmental issues coming from my time with the Park Service. Before I began my Park Service career as a reporter, I was employed for 8 years with what is now a Bloomberg company, doing coverage of any manner of issues that involved regulation, business, environment, banking, finance, labor, all of those sorts of things. So I came packaged with that, and then I freelanced for a while with focus on environmental issues. And I'm a lawyer, and I've done some constitutional litigation. And so, I had a pretty substantial amount of experience. Plus, I covered Congress as a reporter that I brought to this race, and that was really helpful to me because I could point out things that maybe ordinary folks wouldn't think about just because I had done all of these other things. And people were appreciative of that experience in many cases. I didn't run into, I think I maybe had 2 people who said, well, you've never been an elected official, therefore I don't really think you should be running. And, everybody to their own opinion about that, of course. So let's see, guidance to other people. But when you come down that path, that's not embedded in the political process. Like you didn't run for city council and then, you didn't climb the sort of political career ladder. You don't build that infrastructure of support around yourself that can help you achieve that higher race. So that's part of that's the downside of trying to be an outsider. And so when Senator Gonzalez got into the race, she had that infrastructure of, groups that she had been involved in and connections in the political process. And, and that was a huge benefit to her and something that I just couldn't bring to the mix. And then, in progressive circles, I will, there were times when we would be in candidate forums and things, and I'm just trying to remember exactly how this is phrased to me, but someone in the audience got up and said, well, what have you done on the ground? Like, how have you helped people on the ground? And the implication, because this is a point that Senator Gonzalez made at the Young Dems event back in January, that there was several of us as candidates, Senate candidates, and where were these candidates before now? So the implication is that if you haven't been involved in the political process by kind of working in the labor community or the immigrant community, or whatever niche that you want to think about, then you actually haven't done anything. And and I took great umbrage at that, because I had done a fair amount of legal work for various organizations advocating for the environment, a little bit of work for a homeless advocacy group. I did some work for the Transform Columbus Day effort, the effort to eliminate Columbus Day as a holiday. And so all of my adult life, not just my political life, but all of my adult life has been about trying to move the needle in terms of making this country respect human rights, produce economic fairness, address racial injustice, protect the environment. And so to have somebody say, well, what have you done? You haven't done anything. But that resonated with people, like, well, yeah, we haven't seen you where we expect to see you, therefore you haven't really done anything. So that's a problem, as a person who, if you're not in those spaces, as they say, then you may not really be seen, is one way of saying that. The third thing is money. You can overcome almost anything with money.
Yeah.
And without money, you can't overcome very much at all. And, I'm proud of what we raised, because we worked hard to do it. And I did some important messaging in raising the money that we raised, most of which was done through digital, communications. But, it's sort of like, how would I describe this? At everything that you need to do as a candidate, you run into hurdles. So let me give you just one example. To buy the Democratic Party's voter database that allows you to see who voted most recently and where they live and all the information that you need to be able to reach out to them, to recruit them to show up for you, $27,000. Yeah. And when I ran against Michael Bennet in 2022, which was really just an experimental sort of effort, it was like 15, I think. So substantial increase just in that amount of time. Now, what is the point of that? Well, they want to make money with it, but it also poses a barrier to a candidate like myself, right? And so there's that. And then, okay, well, you want to go raise money. Well, how do you find the people to raise money from? So if you are part of a big network of people, either because of your past political activity or because of your professional activities or your family connections or whatever, then maybe you've got a shot at raising a significant amount of money. Like right out of the gate, I think Senator Gonzalez raised, I think I did the math on it, and my math is never always great, so put a little caveat there, but her average donation when she, at the end of the year, so the 3 weeks that she had to report after she announced, her average donation was like $700, and mine was like 25. And that, she was able to line up significant donations before she announced so that she had a decent amount of money to work with. Well, that's smart. That's what you should do. Okay, well, what if you don't, the consultants will tell you, go through your Rolodex and find the people who can give you $100. And I'm like, you don't understand my world. You don't understand my life.
Well, it seems to me like it's a deliberate attempt to keep working people out of the political process.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because you can make your way through if somebody somewhere along the way throws an arm around you and says, I think, because I believe Senator Gonzalez's background is not one of affluence. So I think she's an example of how that can happen. But you have to start at a place where they want to promote you, right? And I don't know what her particular story is, so I don't know what her pathway is. I believed at some point she, if I remember correctly, she worked at some point for the Democratic Party. So, those kinds of that would be a piece of advice. Look to someone like Senator Gonzalez, who's been able to, work her way through the political process and has a substantial amount of support, because it was a very impressive thing to watch her campaign, and it's impressive to me now. And so don't look to me.
Well,
Look to her.
That's interesting. That'll lead me to my next question is we've seen DSA doing some organizing for Me Like Heroes in Denver. We've seen Working Families Party supporting the Gonzalez campaign. Had you reached out to any of those more progressive institutions for support?
Yeah. And they were very fair about the whole thing. Like they gave, I guess, me and anyone at Hickenlooper and anyone else who had declared a candidacy, their candidacy, an opportunity to fill out an endorsement and to, be interviewed, et cetera. But those processes were, well, I mean, they varied in terms of how I felt about them. But Working Families Party had a very truncated opportunity to speak. And I'm not saying that was just for me, that was just their process. So you'd get a question and you'd have like 30 seconds or something.
Right.
And I just don't, that kind of arrangement makes it very difficult to figure out whether anybody knows what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that truly bothers me about the political process, because mostly candidates, do you know what a Pez dispenser is?
Yes.
Okay, right? Like most of these processes are set up to just allow candidates to be Pez dispensers, to just allow them to kind of spit out talking point du jour. And what voters really need to understand is, how thoughtful are the candidates about the issues that they're addressing? How much do they really understand about it? How have they tried to kind of problem solve in their own heads how to fix some of these policy problems? Because anybody can spit out a talking point, myself included. But that won't really tell you whether I actually have a plan to move the needle on Medicare for all. As an incoming U.S. Senator, had I been elected, what was I going to do to move Medicare for all? And that takes more than 30 seconds to explain. And then ask me some questions about, well, what are the downsides of Medicare for all, and why do you think more people don't support it? You know what I'm saying? Like, create some real depth in the conversation. And that was lacking in many of it continues to lack. I mean, that's just the way these things get set up, is, answer yes or no. Well, sometimes yes or no isn't the right way to answer a question. Don't force me to talk down to people. Don't force me to be stupid in my answers, because, yes or no. Let's elevate this conversation so that voters can make better decisions, and we as candidates can actually show what we know and what we're bringing to the table. The Weiser Bennett thing was a really good example of that too. So, Wendy, answer to your question, yes, those organizations did. And, sometimes they said, "Atta girl, Karen, but we're supporting Julie."
Understandable.
Yeah, and I understood that too. I did. Julie had roots in a number of those organizations, and so of course I understood. And the viability thing came into question too. And this I heard more as sort of back channel kind of things, that organizations want to support a candidate they think is quote unquote viable, and viability equals money. And and I did pretty well for a person who didn't get any media coverage, and we should talk about that too. But I certainly understood why organizations thought that Senator Gonzalez was the more viable candidate. And I honestly was not surprised at how those endorsements went for that reason. And she's an excellent candidate. She brings a lot to the race. She just does. So, I want to make sure that I'm clear that I recognize that and admire that about her as a candidate. But I also feel like, I have a little bit of a bone to pick with Indivisible, because their timing seemed really sort of directed at me. So the Colorado endorsement happens on the eve of the caucus and assembly process, Colorado Indivisible's endorsement. And National's endorsement happens like 2 or 3 days, eve is exaggeration, but just a few days before the caucus and assembly process. And the national endorsement occurred just a few days before state assembly. How about hold your fire? Let Democrats actually decide for themselves and then endorse once the assembly is over. And if she wiped the floor with me, which she was going to do, whether indivisible endorsed or not, right? If she wiped the floor with me, then, then go,
Yeah.
right? But let's let things play out. And that kind of, again, I sort of don't love the fingers on the scales kind of thing. I think it would be great. And, it's naive of me to wish for this magical world, but I think it would be great if the process could just be more open rather than everyone sort of thinking about it as this chess game where let's just move the pieces around in a way that suits us.
Right.
Let's let the process stay open. That's kind of what I wish.
Well, I've got two more questions for you before I want to move on to some state and local elections. Number one, have you thrown your weight behind anyone in the Senate race
No
officially?
one's asked me to throw my weight.
I mean, 24%, that's nothing to shake a stick at,
Well, among active Democrats, right? Like there was what 1,500 people at the state assembly. So in terms of like how that translates out in the real world, I don't think it's of any consequence. But um, uh, no one's asked me, and endorsements are something that I feel a little queasy about as well, both as somebody giving and receiving. And I've only asked for endorsements maybe 2 or 3 times across all of the races that I have run, and and I have regretted it in 2 of the 3 times, because there again, it it tends to create momentum for people independent of voters getting eyes on them and listening to them. And I understand the logic of it. Oh, well, if my preferred representative thinks so and so is the right candidate, then that's the person I'm going to support. No, don't outsource your judgment to other people. Keep it within yourself. Do the
No.
work yourself to figure it out. Because, like Crow and the Goose endorsing Bennett, I believe both of them have. What's there you go, right? So
No.
that flies against what active Democrats want. I mean, Phil Weiser is extraordinarily popular everywhere I've been, at the state assembly, extremely popular. Same with Senator Gonzalez at the state assembly. And yet, who people are endorsing two people who aren't that. Um, what's that about exactly? It's kind
Yeah.
of to me.
I can tell
So
you, as a Crow constituent, it makes me want to run against him.
yeah, so I don't remember the question now, but anyway, I don't love the endorsement process. And I think, and the reason I'm kind of sharing all of this is I've been thinking hard about how we ended up where we ended up, both in terms of having a degenerate like Trump be president of the United States, not once, but twice, how we ended up with a feckless Democratic Party. I just heard a couple of days ago, and maybe you can confirm this, that the Democratic Party's ratings are lower than Trump's. Have you
I
heard that?
believe so, yeah. It's not good.
Yeah, that's just shocking to me. And then, in spite of the fact that the party is in such a hole, that Jeffries and Schumer continue to be our congressional leaders, it's just that the party has yet to really take a stand on Gaza in a meaningful way, that APAC contributions aren't a deal breaker for, active Dems. These are things that I don't understand. And I don't understand them both in terms of like, how did it happen? I mean, I think I have a better sense of how it happened. What I don't understand is how anyone thinks that this is going to be a good thing for democracy. You don't rescue a democracy with a political process that is so misaligned with the views of the majority of people and misaligned with their interests as well. And so, the Democratic Party's failures, I did a TikTok on this and I think it got pretty good traction. Like, is this intentional?
I honestly think it is. There's a portion of the Democratic Party that is essentially Republicans. Like as you were saying, um, Hickenlooper would fit just fine as a 1980s Republican. So I do think there's a certain aspect of there's a portion of the Democratic Party that wants to stop progressive movements and stomp them out before they ever get started.
Yeah.
But let's go to last question on this, and then we'll move on. What's next for you? Are you looking at your next moves? Are you still planning on running for another office?
Well, I mean, there's only one office that I can realistically run for again, and that would be the US Senate. And I am mulling the possibility of doing that in light of everything that I've learned this time around. Um, I live in Elbert County. I have a small acreage. I have animals. I cannot move into a quote blue area. But more to the point, I don't possess the interest or the knowledge base that will allow me to be effective as a state legislator or a county commissioner or any of those kinds of offices. Why did I pick the US Senate? And before that, I ran in Congressional District 4. Why did I pick these federal offices? Because federal law and policy is what I know. And I don't bring anything of any, I think I have decent judgment and I'm a quick study and, so it's not a zero, but I don't bring anything particularly special to a state house race, even
Yeah.
if I wanted one. And, Elbert County is solidly Republican. So I'm going to run for an office. Let it be the office that I'm qualified for. Let it be the office that, that I can actually bring some value added to. So I am thinking about that. I don't, there's days when I feel so discouraged by the Democratic Party. Today is one of them where I'm not sure that it's a fight to stay engaged with as I have for the last few years. And there's wonderful people in the party, and there's really talented people running for office, all the way up and down the ballot. And, I have met some wonderful people, great acquaintances. All of that was in the plus category of this run. What's in the negative category of it is feeling like the process just is, I don't want to say rigged because it's not that, but that it's got structural mechanisms in it to make it very difficult for anyone who's not already embedded in it to succeed. And I'll just give you one quick example of that. So when at the county assembly, you have to have 15% of the vote to get any delegates that carry over to the state assembly. Well, why? Like if you get 10%, why don't you get those 10% of the delegates at the county level to carry over to the state assembly? But you don't, you get zero. Now
Yeah.
that's a mechanism that's going to make it harder for somebody like me to get on the ballot. Had that not been the case, my path to the ballot would have been much easier because I came very close in some counties to the 15, at least one county, I came very big one, right? And so, just things like that. And then they won't round up. And so, one of the state treasurer candidates, Brianna Titone, she was close, man. She was close. I don't remember the number, but if they had rounded up, I think if she'd rounded up, she would have been on the ballot. So why? Like why? Why do it that way? And then they stack the assemblies on 2 days. And so you got the big counties, almost all of them having their assemblies on the same day. Well, if you're a lesser known candidate and people are getting eyes on you for the first time, you can't get to all of those places, right? And so there's all kinds of, and the neutrality policy is a joke. I mean,
Yeah.
So anyway, I think I said more than I was needing to. I don't remember the question now.
No worries. And I
Anyway,
want
my
to
next
move on
steps.
to broader. Let's do We'll start with Colorado and then we'll go national.
Okay.
So we've got a slew of progressive candidates here in Colorado this time around. I want to know who you're excited about, who you're looking forward to voting for, and or just if they're out of your district, who are you excited to see running?
Well, I'm in Elbert County, so there aren't too many progressives in, right? But I will say I don't love what happened in the CD4 race to Patricia Calvarese and John Pedora.
Yeah.
To more progressive candidates than Eileen Laubacher. And there
Both
again,
friends of the show, actually.
that looks like fingers being put on the scale.
100%.
And I don't
100%.
like that. And we'll,
For a Republican, no less, who just switched to
yes,
Democrat. Yeah.
yes, and
Infuriating.
reportedly voted for Trump in round one. And now all of a sudden I'm supposed to think that she's a Democrat. And I've met Eileen. She seems like a kind person, but some things have happened where it looks like she's pretty comfortable being, very traditionally political. And so I don't feel good about that. And I think sidelining two candidates who were carrying the progressive flag, as those two were, is not a good thing. Let's see, who am I excited? I think the AG candidates are very solid, and I think will be well served by any of them. And let's see, I don't have 100% agreement with Weiser on policy issues, but I think he's going to be way better than Bennett would be. I
Yeah.
don't understand why anybody would vote for Bennett. I don't care if you're a centrist or whatever. I don't.
Well, that answers one of my next questions.
It escapes me. I mean, and I guess I had a lot of pent up things to say, but one of the things that bothers me about politicians is they will say, I introduced a bill, my bill to do ABC. The reality is only a handful of measures come out of Congress, relatively speaking. And the other truth of that is for any individual member of Congress, that number is very, very low. So don't be applauding them for just introducing a bill. And I see this where they run on this bill that they've introduced. And, it may never, and almost certainly won't see the light of day. And so the better question is, okay, how are you going to take these provisions and actually see them to fruition? What bills do have traction that this could potentially, this great idea you have could eventually work its way in? Because the legislative process is pretty hierarchical. The leadership really calls the shots about what's going to go through, and that translates down to the congressional committees. And so, random member of Congress having an idea and dropping a bill means nothing. Mostly nothing. I don't want to over exaggerate, but it's not particularly impactful. So, ask questions like that, like, okay, well, great. And Bennett comes to mind on this because I can't remember what he's played an important role in the child tax credit, and I give him credit for that. Like, yeah, it's good that you've done that. But at one point he said that, the bill lifted children out of poverty. Well, no, a temporary respite from poverty is not lifting people out of poverty.
Right.
And so that kind of, he's a smart man. He knows the difference, right? So why would he misrepresent? I mean, for me, it's a misrepresentation. Why would you lead people to think that you would actually move the needle in a significant way over the long haul when you actually hadn't? Because what happened after those enhancements expired, people went back into poverty.
Right.
And so, I wish they wouldn't do things like that. I wish they would just be straightforward about their accomplishments. And, look, I mean, I'm not a Bennett fan. I ran against him because I wasn't a Bennett fan. But they work hard. They do important things. But in this moment, when our political system is essentially been deconstructed, and whether it can be put back together again is a big question, when we are facing misogyny and white supremacy and all that, when we've got these insane wars, when people are dying due to American incompetence, really? Do you have anything to say about that as a politician, as, a U.S. senator?
Yeah.
And shouldn't you? I mean, shouldn't you be speaking out about these things without being pressured to talk about Gaza? Shouldn't you be concerned before anybody else asks you? And this is that's where I get a little puzzled. Like, my goodness gracious, you have climbed to the top of the political establishment. I heard Bennett's complain about, how appalled he was that the Democrats let Biden become the nominee. And I'm thinking, dude, you're a U.S. senator.
Yeah.
You couldn't speak up? Hell, you could have ran against him.
Yeah.
You ran once, run again, right? You might have lost, but you might not have.
Right.
So anyway, I think I got off topic again.
So Denver has a pretty strong chance to send a real progressive, Mila Kiros, to the House. Have you followed her campaign at all, and are you excited for Mila?
I have not followed her campaign, but when we did the DSA candidate forum, she was there, and she is very, very impressive. I will say that she's very impressive. But so is Wanda James. So, I think as long as you don't vote for DeGette, you're going to be good.
Right, right.
Not that I'm endorsing anybody, because like I said, I'm not too keen on endorsements. Unless somebody asks me, then I might consider doing that, but nobody's asked me. Um, but I think, yeah, same with Diana DeGette. Like you've got all this tenure in Congress, and we're literally watching our political system being dismantled as we
Crumble,
speak,
yeah.
and you've somehow managed to stay on the sidelines of that fight. And that's the other thing. Like they think that they fight if they just say stuff on the floor of the Congress. No, that's not,
Yeah,
the
you got to
House of
get
the
out.
Senate.
You have to
That is
organize the working class. Like,
exactly,
yes,
exactly. Like get off your ass and do what Bernie Sanders has done. Go out there in the world. And every single politician should be, Democrat should be going into these red communities, these federal elected officials, because they're their constituents too, and saying, here's what we think. Help us understand where you're coming from and why you still support him.
yeah,
Because one of the things I did a few years ago was follow right-wing media and try to compare it with like MSNBC and totally different narratives and views of the world. And this is why I could see what was happening to Biden. But you wouldn't see it on MSNBC or
yeah.
CNN, but you could see it on Fox. And we need to understand what other people are seeing in the world and how they're assimilating what's going on. And yeah, got off topic again.
All right. And then finally, Weiser and Bennett were both asked about the Worker Protection Act. Both of them pretty much failed to say they would sign it. I think Weiser said he would vote for a Worker Protection Act, not necessarily this one. Bennett said he would preserve the second election. Um, Bennett, I understand. What is Weiser's hesitation on this? It seems like free votes to me. Excuse me. I'm not a politician, but what is the holdup for Weiser on voting for the Worker Protection Act?
I have no idea, honestly. Yeah, can't help you out there. And I don't know what his thinking is.
No worries.
Yeah, he
And
hasn't
then
pulled me aside and said, here's what I think.
which have you seen the interview with Victor Marx and Kyle Clark that came out a few days ago?
Just a snippet or two.
What's that?
Just a little bit, not much of
Okay.
it.
So he's talking about his exorcisms. He's talking about what the number of people he may or may not have killed. So my question is, Victor Marx, insane or just stupid?
Well, I'd have to see more about it, but to say, but let me just think here for a second.
Or
I
if
think
there's
I think there's a lot of detachment from reality right now across the political spectrum. And and I think that on the right, it's showing up with these kind of charismatic, religiously grounded, Pete Hegseth, Christian nationalism, all of that sort of thing that Trump, I think, has sort of used to his own ends, and they've used him. So it's like this kind of mutual thing. And as far as I can tell, Victor Marx maybe fits in that category. And so why would that movement be gaining strength? Like this idea of sort of stripping women of their voting rights, which is a thing, and shaming women for having jobs and making it harder for people to get out of abusive marriages and all that sort of thing. Why would you want to roll back the clock on an era that was deeply oppressive to women? Because somewhere somebody decided that, well, if we just follow a set of rules, the world will make more sense and it won't be as dysfunctional as it is now. And most of us want narratives like that of some sort. myself included. Like I would, I want to believe that if Graham Plattner goes to the U.S. Senate and Julie gets to the U.S. Senate and, and Weiser becomes governor and, that all will be well in the world because the progressives will be in charge and we'll fix things. And I don't literally think that that's true. Do I think it could be better? Yes. Do I think it can be fixed? No. In large measure, because or fixed purely by progressive policies, because progressive policies themselves are at times at odds with reality. And, one that pops into my head right away is the whole energy conversation. So we can see how deeply we've been dissembled, I guess, is maybe the word I'm looking for, as a result of the climbing oil prices. The economic prosperity of this country, really of the world, the lifestyle that we all live with our devices and 24/7 this and 24/7 that is fueled by fossil fuels, period. And, the idea that we're not going to have fertilizer now and what that's going to do to human hunger. But what's the mantra? Let's keep it in the ground. Okay, well, if we keep it in the ground, how are we going to feed people? And I'm an environmentalist to my core. Like I love the natural world. And for me, the natural world is how we're going to save ourselves. So let me be super clear. I am no friend of the oil and gas industry, but I don't want to make policy out of delusion. I don't want to make policy out of bullshit. And so what's driving this rant right now? A YouTube ad for Phil Weiser talking about clean energy, how he's going to go all in on clean energy. Well, let me give one example of sort of how this plays out or can play out. Number one, clean energy, renewables require a massive amount of non-renewable inputs, including fossil fuels, but minerals in particular, that come from various parts of the globe, often from the global south, often under conditions that are deeply harmful to those people's livelihoods, human rights, etc. Okay, so are we going to be blind to that and just call it clean energy and let's just do that? Or are we going to acknowledge the injustice that goes along with energy production of any sort? I want to acknowledge it. I want to deal with it. I want to face it. And so, that's what I mean by delusion. Let's take another delusion. Nuclear power. Oh, let's have small nuclear reactors. That's been deemed green. Right? Democrats voted to call nuclear energy green. Well, that's nonsense. But let's say for sake of argument that, climate change, what about nuclear proliferation? Talk about something that we're not seeing,
Right.
That is a literal threat to the existence of life on this planet. And yet who's talking about that? How about artificial intelligence? Okay, we're starting to pay attention to that. Who among the progressive candidates is carrying the flag for regulating that industry top to bottom so it doesn't destroy life on Earth? I did. Are there others? I mean, it's great to talk about the oligarchs and it needs to be said, but this is why I'm not 100% confident that simply sending progressive to Washington are going to be the answer until, we talk forthrightly about the complexity and difficulties of these policy choices we make. It's not like their choice is bad and this one is good and let's do that and we'll all be better off. No, everything has a trade-off of one sort or another. So I'll come back to the clean energy thing and then I'll take a breath. So I live in Elbert County. Xcel Energy is building a ginormous transmission line along the Eastern Plains, not that far from my house. And we don't have the fire resources to deal with that. And the energy does not come to us. It will destroy the beauty of the area. It poses a fire risk. It doesn't benefit us in terms of power, and yet it's being rammed down our throats. And what was the genesis of this? I believe it was Polis's clean energy mandate. So when you ignore the downstream effects of the decisions that you make, then you just create disaffection. And then people start wandering for the next person who's got the magic answer. And then when that turns out to be bullshit, then they wander off to the next. That's what I'm saying. And so Victor Marx, long answer to your question, Victor Marx is a symbol or a emblematic of a political system that has for at least 30 years now ignored the difficult challenges facing this country and facing the world. And that is a process of how we're selecting candidates and how we're electing them, because we didn't used to close our eyes to all of the complexities of the world. We have environmental laws on the books because in a bipartisan way, the parties were able to come together and say, yeah, we don't really want to see bald eagles go extinct, right? Where is that leadership now? And that's what frankly keeps me up nights, because, you know, I'm decades older than you are. And if somebody had told me that we would be facing zero progress on the leading issues of my day when I was a young woman, and in fact add new issues, and roll back the clock on all of the progress that had been made up to that point, I would not have believed you.
Yeah.
So Victor Marx is a symbol of a diseased political system in the same way that Donald Trump is.
Understood. Well, I did have quite a few more questions, but we are actually running out of time. So I want to say thank you, Karen. Are you going to leave up your page? Would you still like people to come to your page? How can people interact with you, follow you?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of not been too active on social media of late. My life, you know, when you're a candidate, your life falls apart, you know, your personal life falls apart. And so I'm trying to patch things back together again. But Facebook, I'm a little bit active on. I'll probably gear up and be more active as soon as I get a little bit caught up. But yeah, and my webpage is still breslinforcolorado.com, and I'm toying with the idea of running again. I don't know that I'll do it, but I don't know that I won't. So. And I welcome people's feedback on this conversation.
It's quite the undertaking, so I don't blame you either way.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, and thank you for running. And I always tell people the more progressives get involved, the easier it is for the rest of us to get involved. So thank you for running. Thank you for your time and energy. And it was great following your campaign, and I hope for the best for you in the future.
Oh, thanks. Thanks too, Mike. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.